In the 3rd year of my marriage to Oliver, he made sure everyone hid the fact from me that he was keeping a younger, prettier girl on the side. Everyone around me would say, "You're his first love, his weakness." But when drunk, he would laugh and say, "Lara, once you marry her, you realize she's just SOSO. The man who, at 17, swore to love me for a lifetime, now cradled a young girl in his arms and cooed. She's so boring." Of course, I love you the most, baby. The day I left, no one noticed anything unusual. The maid smiled and asked if I was going out for tea and shopping. I smiled back lightly and nodded. No need to prepare dinner tonight. When I hear his heart belongs to another, I destroy it in flames, burn it to ashes and let the wind scatter them. Oliver didn't know that the SOSO Lara was a stubborn woman. In her dictionary, the word forgiveness didn't exist. Chapter 01. I held my coat, the bag in my hand containing liver-protecting pills. The hallway was long, the light cast over the oil paintings, refracting into a kaleidoscope of colors. The scattered reflections fell all over the floor. From the room at the end, bursts of laughter grew louder and louder. Oliver had booked this entire floor for years. No one was allowed to approach, so they hadn't even bothered closing the door. My heel caught on the long pile of the carpet, and I stumbled slightly. As I bent down, the necklace around my neck suddenly broke. Pearls, large and small, rolled across the floor. A strange ache pierced my heart. I was about to crouch down to pick up the pearls, when I heard Oliver's voice. "Come on, I'm not as fickle as you all. My first love, my white moonlight, the love of my life, is none other than my wife." He was probably drunk. His voice, tinged with intoxication, was full of pride and satisfaction. I couldn't help but purse my lips, holding the cool pearls. My heart unfolded as if soothed. But unfortunately, Oliver suddenly sighed. "Once you marry her, you realize she's just SOSO." I clenched my hand abruptly. The pearls pressed painfully into the tender flesh of my palm, and the smile froze on my lips. "And what about me, Oliver?" A soft, girlish voice suddenly rang out, tinged with grievance and resentment. "You say your wife is the love of your life, but what am I to you? Just last night, you said you loved me the most." The men burst into laughter. "Silly girl, you believe what a man says in bed? Besides, it's only natural for a man to love his wife. Why are you, the mistress, trying to compete?" "Oliver, look at them!" The girl's voice cracked with tears. She sounded so pitiful and fragile, it could make anyone's heart ache. Chapter 02. All right, enough. Why are you all teasing her? What do you mean teasing? Isn't she just the mistress? This is my proper girlfriend, so watch your words, Oliver said, his tone slightly low, as if annoyed. "No way. Bro, you're serious?" Oliver responded lightly. She's been with me since she was 18. I have to take responsibility." "Beast. You made a move as soon as she became an adult. Aren't you afraid your wife will fight with you over this?" Oliver chuckled. "She depends on me. What does she have to fight with? But you all better keep your mouths shut. I love my wife and don't want to upset her." "You love your wife. Then what about me?" the young girl asked, pouting and unwilling to let it go. Oliver pulled her closer, wrapping her in his arms to soothe her. "Is this little thing worth shedding tears over?" the girl whimpered, her voice sweet and clinging. "Oliver, I want you to say you love me the most. Even if it's a lie, I'd still be willing." "All right, baby, she's so boring." "Of course, I love you the most." I stood in the shadows outside the door and suddenly smiled. The man who once swore to love me for a lifetime was now coaxing a younger girl. Yet, I didn't even feel like stepping inside to question him. Once unfaithful, never again trustworthy. I turned away and walked back down the same long hallway I'd come through. 17-year-old Oliver had once carved my name into his desk in secret. He said, "Oliver loves Lara and will love her forever." But his forever lasted only these fleeting 10 years. Chapter 03. That morning, when Oliver came back, I was already downstairs having breakfast. He rushed in with a large bouquet of flowers and a gift in his arms. His face was full of guilt and remorse. "I'm sorry. Honey, last night's socializing went on too late, and I couldn't make it home. When we got married, he promised me that no matter how busy he was, he would never stay out all night. But over the past 6 months, he'd been coming home later and later, and this time, he didn't come home at all. I set down my chopsticks and looked up at him. His suit, shirt, and tie had all been changed. The scent on him was clean and fresh. He'd gone to great lengths to cover his tracks. He placed the bouquet down, walked over, and tried to kiss me. Honey, I swear, this was the first and only time. I raised my hand to block him and asked, word by word, did you stay at the office last night? Oliver didn't hesitate for a moment. Yes. See? I even changed into the clothes you prepared for me. As he spoke, he gripped my shoulders, looking at me cautiously. Honey, are you upset? I'll stay with you the entire day today. I won't go to the office, okay? I looked at him, at the reflection of myself in his pupils. His gaze was steady, unwavering, and without a hint of guilt. And I, too, could hide my heartbreak completely. No, I pushed his hands away. Let's eat first. But as soon as he sat down, his phone rang. I saw him frown and hang up, but it rang again almost immediately. He hesitated for a few seconds before hanging up once more. Then a message came through. Oliver checked it, and his brows furrowed deeply. Lara, something urgent came up at the office. Go ahead. Never mind. I'll have someone else handle it. I promise to spend the whole day with you. He said this, but his face betrayed his restlessness. There's no need. Work is more important. Go now. I looked at him calmly, my heartache numbed to the point of indifference. Oliver hesitated for only a moment before standing up. I'll try to come back as early as I can. I hummed in acknowledgement, watching as he rushed out and drove away. It was only after he left that I realized the tears on my face had turned cold. I called my best friend, Roma. Can you help me book a health checkup at your hospital today? Chapter 04. When the results of my medical checkup came out, I let out a sigh of relief. My body was still clean, and I wasn't pregnant. When I married Oliver, my health wasn't in great condition. That's why we never had children. But to be sure, I underwent a thorough examination. Doctor, I'd like to ask, how has my recovery been? When I got a positive answer, I felt much of the heavy weight in my heart dissipate. Clutching the report, I walked out. As I turned the corner of the hallway, I happened to hear Oliver's name. Oliver, if I really am pregnant, can I keep the baby? I stopped in my tracks, looking at the two figures not far away. Oliver had a cigarette between his fingers, his brows furrowed. Looking impatient, the young girl had a bare face, tears streaming down her cheeks as she clung to his sleeve. Pleading and shaking, Oliver sneered. My wife hasn't even had a child yet. What makes you think you're first in line? But this is my first baby. I can't bear to lose it. I promise I'll behave. I won't cause you any trouble. And I'll make sure your wife never finds out about me or the baby. Oliver tapped her face lightly with the hand holding the cigarette. Don't be naive. Darling, there's no way I'm letting you keep the child. Be good. Terminate the pregnancy, and I'll buy you a house. But if you don't, Zoe, let me be blunt. There are plenty of pretty, obedient girls at your school. I could sleep with a different one every day without breaking a sweat. You're not irreplaceable. The girl froze at his words, her tear-streaked face turning pale. I'll listen. Oliver, please don't abandon me. Good girl. Go get checked. All right, I'll go for the checkup. But, Oliver, you once said your wife's health is poor and she can't have kids. If I really am pregnant, you could let her raise the baby as her own. I won't fight or make a fuss. Would that work? Oliver was silent for a moment. Go get the checkup first. We'll talk after. The girl sniffled and walked through the door. Oliver finished his cigarette and stubbed it out. When he turned around, I pretended to have just walked up. When he saw me, he seemed stunned for a moment, but he quickly replaced his expression with one of concern and worry. Honey, why are you at the hospital? Are you feeling unwell or hurt somewhere? Chapter 05. Oliver grabbed my arm, looking utterly frantic. Why didn't you call me? Coming to the hospital alone like this? He looked me up and down, His eyes filled with anxious concern. It was as if, over the past 10 years, his love for me had never waned. Not even a little, but my hands and feet began to grow cold. It was as though the chills seeped into my very bones. How could Oliver act so deeply in love when he called me honey with such devotion? His mistress was just a few rooms away, getting checked for pregnancy, yet he could stand before me without showing even the slightest flaw. So much so that I couldn't tell anymore which Oliver was the real one. "I'm fine," I said. "I just came to visit a friend." He exhaled deeply and pulled me into a tight embrace. "You scared me to death, honey." "Oliver, are you really worried about me?" I asked softly, looking at him. "Of course I am. How could I not be?" He held me even tighter. "When I married you, do you remember how poor your health was? I spent 3 years nursing you back to health, little by little. Honey, do you know that just now, seeing you here, I nearly lost my soul from fear? If anything happened to you, how would I go on?" I wanted to laugh, but the corners of my mouth were frozen stiff. My lips trembled uncontrollably, as if I'd swallowed a mouthful of hot oil. I asked him, "Then why are you here at the hospital?" His grip on my arm tightened slightly. "Oh, I came to see an elder. He's in the hospital." But this was the obstetrics and gynecology department. Still, I didn't expose his lie. Chapter 06. On the way home, Oliver's phone kept ringing. He simply turned it off. "Even if the King of Heaven himself calls today, I'm staying home with you." I said nothing, just looked out at the street scenes passing by. The route home took us past our old high school, one familiar scene after another, one so sweet, now felt like honey-coated blades stabbing into my heart. My vision blurred for a moment, and in that blur, I seemed to see the past me and Oliver again. "Lara, please don't be mad, okay? I'm begging you. Just listen to me. Hear me out. Just one thing." "All right. One thing. 2 things. Then, just 2, okay?" Teenage Oliver tugged at my sleeve with a cheeky grin, refusing to let go. "Get lost. Oliver, don't cry. Lara, hit me if you want. Hit me as hard as you can, just don't cry. All right?" The phone in my bag suddenly buzzed, snapping me out of my thoughts and pulling me back to reality. I took out my phone. The message was from an unknown number. "He says your health is bad, and you can never satisfy him. 3 years of marriage, and you've never even changed positions. He's sick of it. He doesn't like using protection. And he told me to keep the baby if I get pregnant. After all, you can't get pregnant anyway. You're worthless. Why are you still holding on to him?" I suddenly laughed. Oliver glanced at me curiously. "Honey, what's so funny?" I locked the screen and said calmly, "My best friend just reminded me about our afternoon tea date. I completely forgot. And now she's scolding me." Oliver seemed to relax all of a sudden. "So, are you still going?" "Of course. Or Roma will never let me hear the end of it for 3 days. You should head to the office and get some work done too." Oliver frowned. "I'm starting to get jealous of Roma. You always favor her. I really don't want you to go. Wouldn't it be better to have some time for just the 2 of us?" I turned to look at him, but he was already signaling to turn around, ready to take me elsewhere. I smiled faintly and looked away. "There'll be other opportunities." "Exactly. We've got a lifetime together. I won't fight with Roma this time." He dropped me off at a private club before rushing off in his car. Half an hour later, Zoe sent me another message. "Did he leave you behind again? You see, he told me that whenever I cry, he can't help but soften. By the way, I'm pregnant. He said I should keep the baby. He even mentioned liking daughters. But I want to give him a son." I did the math. This one's definitely a boy. It's such a shame. Though, the doctor said we can't have sex in the early stages of pregnancy. The new lingerie he bought for me hasn't even been worn yet. He's always had such a strong drive. And since you can't satisfy him, he must be so frustrated. I didn't reply. Instead, I took screenshots of all the messages she had sent. As I did this, my hands trembled slightly. Maybe it was because Oliver had been acting so convincingly all these years. Or perhaps I had been too naive, trusting him blindly. So when this ridiculous and debauched side of him was revealed, I still couldn't control my emotions. To think that the tenderness he showed me in bed, which had moved me so deeply, was all fake. He had long grown tired of our restrained and gentle intimacy, when I thought his restraint was love. Reality struck me hard, like a slap in the face. The decreasing frequency of our intimacy wasn't because of love or care, but simply because he couldn't enjoy himself. He couldn't even be bothered to fake it anymore. Before heading home, I made a phone call to an old mentor. Lara, you silly child. Why has it taken you so long to call me? Professor, does your research team still need people? I'd like to join. Are you sure your health can handle it? Back when I graduated, I had wanted to join. My professor had been eager for me to come along, too, but my health was too poor back then. The research team traveled all over, north and south, across the country and abroad. The conditions were often harsh, with meals on the road and nights spent under the stars being the norm. I just had a checkup. The doctor said as long as I'm careful, I'll be fine. What about your husband? Is he okay with it? Professor, you need to know that if you join, you'll spend years on the road, and many of our projects are classified. You'll rarely be in touch with family. Professor, I've already decided to get a divorce. Did he do something to hurt you? I smiled, swallowing my tears. Yes, he cheated on me. 10 years of love. Are you sure about this? Professor, do you remember what you told me back when you decided to get a divorce? When his heart belongs to another, destroy it in flames, burn it to ashes, and let the wind scatter them. My eyes burned red, and tears streamed down my face. Professor, you're the one who taught me. Of course. I'm just like you. Good. Good. Lara. Then I'll be waiting for you to join us. Chapter 07. This was probably the first time since our marriage that I'd actively asked Oliver for money. On the other end of the phone, he laughed cheerfully. Honey, isn't all my money yours anyway? You can use my card however you like. This is different, I insisted, unusually stubborn. All right, I'll have Pablo transfer it to you right away. Oliver, I'm not taking your money for nothing. I have a gift for you too. In 3 days, go to the reception office at our old high school. Find the old janitor there. Do you remember him? He'll give it to you. Oliver chuckled at my words. How could I forget? I transferred there in my senior year, but in my first 2 years, I must have written you hundreds of love letters. He's the one who helped me deliver them all. I smiled as well. Yes. So 3 days from now, don't forget to pick it up. I won't. Honey, I'm already looking forward to it. Chapter 08. As soon as the money Oliver sent me arrived, I anonymously donated it to my mentor's research team. I printed out the divorce agreement and all the screenshots of the messages. I sealed them in an envelope and personally delivered it to the reception office at our old high school. The broken pearl necklace and the first ring he ever gave me, I melted them down with my own hands in a workshop and discarded the remains. Along with them, I burned all the countless love letters he had once written to me. On the final morning, I had breakfast with Oliver, just as I always did, and just as usual, I saw him off to work. Oliver looked apologetic. I was planning to take you to the hot springs today, but I broke my promise again. It's okay. Work is more important, I said, smiling faintly at him. Go ahead. Don't delay your work. Oliver gazed at me with a mix of tenderness and guilt. Honey, you're always so understanding, so good to me. Over the years, I've been so busy with work that I haven't spent enough time with you. I looked at him quietly, but my thoughts drifted far away. The boy who once warmed my cold hands in the winter morning mist. The man who knelt before his parents for an entire day to gain their blessing to marry me. 10 years together, and he was still as young and handsome as ever. His love for me had been real. His betrayal was real. His guilt and pity were real, but so was his restless heart, addicted to the thrill of forbidden love. I knew I could choose to be blind and silent, to remain Mrs. Oliver for a lifetime. No one could take that title away from me, but I no longer wanted to be Mrs. Oliver. I wanted to be Lara again. Suddenly, Oliver stepped forward and embraced me. Honey, I love you so much. Wait for me tonight. We'll have dinner together. I didn't know how I managed to force out a smile. or how I restrained myself from asking unnecessary, redundant questions. Fortunately, his phone rang again, demanding his attention like an urgent summons. I gently pushed him away. Go on, don't keep them waiting. Reluctantly, he turned and walked away, but his steps grew quicker as he went. I smiled faintly, turned, and went upstairs. Just as usual, I changed into my gardening clothes and tended to the plants in the garden. At noon, I had a simple lunch. After a short nap, I got up and changed into clothes for going out. I grabbed a bag, casually stuffing it with all my documents and important belongings. As I went downstairs, the maid smiled and asked, "Ma'am, are you going out for shopping or tea?" I nodded lightly, smiling as well. Yes, and don't bother preparing dinner tonight. He wouldn't be home for dinner, and I would never be coming back. Chapter 09. The driver dropped me off at the club I often visited and left. I went downstairs, where the car my professor had arranged was already waiting at the corner. The car had classified plates, impossible for ordinary people to trace. Clutching the bag in my hands, I crossed the street and got in. As the car door closed, my phone rang. The name flashing on the screen was Oliver. I didn't hang up, but deep down, I knew this would be the last time I ever spoke to him. "Honey, I'm so ashamed to even tell you this." Oliver's voice was full of regret and guilt. "There's an important engagement tonight, one I really can't cancel. I won't be able to have dinner with you at home, but I promise, I'll come back early tonight to be with you, okay? Honey, please don't be mad. I've already sent Pablo to pick up the gift I ordered for you. You're going to love it when you see it." Holding the phone, I gazed out at the seemingly endless street beyond the car window. Outside the hustle and bustle of the traffic, there was a quiet emptiness. That figure I'd held in my heart for 10 years, the boy in the blue and white striped school uniform, vanished completely from my heart at that moment. I knew, with absolute clarity, that I no longer loved him. "Honey, why aren't you saying anything? Are you upset?" Oliver's cautious voice came through the phone. "Forget it. I'll cancel. I won't go. I'll come home tonight for dinner instead." "There's no need. It's fine," I replied, lowering my gaze. I stared at the empty space on my ring finger. "You can go ahead and take care of your work. I'm having dinner with Roma tonight. Then I'll try to come back as early as I can. All right? If it's too late, just stay near the office. No need to come back. No matter how late. I'll come home." I said nothing more. Oliver spoke a few more words before hurriedly ending the call. I placed the phone back in my bag. As the car gently jostled along the road, I slowly closed my eyes. Chapter 10. Oliver stood by the window in the hallway, a cigarette dangling from his lips. The sky outside was pitch black, the night growing deeper. Lara's health had never been good, and her routine was always consistent. At this hour, she should already be asleep. When Zoe came out of the examination room with red-rimmed eyes, Oliver had already stubbed out his cigarette. He glanced at her and asked coldly, "What did the results say?" "A bit of light bleeding. The doctor recommended I stay in bed and rest as much as possible this month." "Then don't go to school. Stay home and rest." "Hubby, will you stay with me?" Zoe clung to his arm, her voice full of grievance. Oliver frowned and pulled his arm away. "Didn't I tell you before? Don't call me that. There's no one here, so I thought it'd be okay." "Enough. I'll have the driver take you home. Won't you stay with me? I'm really not feeling well today. I'm scared it'll start bleeding again." "The doctor gave you medication, didn't they? Take your medicine and rest properly." Oliver strode toward the elevator. "I'm not a doctor. There's no point in me staying." Zoe bit her lip, tears threatening to spill again, but afraid of annoying Oliver. She forced them back and followed him into the elevator. "Oliver." Just as she was about to get into the car, Zoe couldn't hold back any longer and turned to call out to him. Oliver checked his watch, clearly impatient. "What now? Will you come tomorrow?" "The doctor said no sex this month." "Didn't they?" Oliver raised an eyebrow. "Seeing you is pointless. This month, I need to spend time with my wife. You'd better behave." Zoe was both furious and aggrieved, tears streaming down her face. Remembering her pregnancy, Oliver reluctantly offered a few words of comfort. Rest well. I'll come by when I have time. Zoe watched as he got into the car and left without looking back. Her tears turned cold on her cheeks, and her jaw ached from clenching so hard. She couldn't understand. She was young and beautiful. How could she lose to that sickly wife of his? Every time she thought about it, the hatred burned deep in her bones. And yet, she couldn't bear to let go of Oliver or everything he gave her. So she swallowed her anger and endured it. Chapter 11. Oliver's car stopped in front of the house. The maid came out to greet him, and he asked as usual, "Has Madam gone to bed already?" But the maid, taking his coat, looked startled. "Madam isn't with you?" Oliver froze mid-step. "What did you just say?" The night was deep, and only the glow from the house's lights illuminated him. "Madam went out this afternoon to shop and have tea. When the driver offered to pick her up in the evening, she said there was no need because she was having dinner with you outside." The more the maid spoke, the more nervous she became, her voice trembling. "Before Madam left in the afternoon, she told us not to prepare dinner tonight." Suddenly, Oliver took a step forward and grabbed the maid by her collar. "What else did she say? Don't leave out a single word. Tell me everything clearly." The maid turned pale with fear, and nothing else. "She just said not to prepare dinner." Oliver released her abruptly, pushing her away. He strode quickly upstairs while pulling out his phone to call Roma. "Are you with Lara?" "No, we didn't meet today, but this afternoon, Lara said she had dinner plans with you tonight." Oliver's voice was unnervingly calm. Even he couldn't believe how calm he sounded. But no one saw how his hand, gripping the phone, was trembling uncontrollably. "Lara did call me," Roma admitted, "but I had a surgery to attend, so we agreed to meet another day." Oliver didn't even realize how he ended the call. He dialed the numbers of Lara's other close friends, but all of them said they hadn't been in touch with her today or seen her. Standing outside the master bedroom, Oliver found the door tightly shut. For a moment, he didn't even have the courage to push it open. How could he, in his foolish optimism, think Lara, someone so smart, knew nothing about his actions? But when had she found out? And how much did she know? Could he even hope for her forgiveness? A surge of panic brought back memories from years ago. Back then, they were in college. Because of club activities, he'd grown close to a junior who had a crush on him, something many people noticed. Lara had mentioned it to him twice, but he hadn't taken it seriously. After all, he loved Lara so much that no other woman could compare. Later, during a club dinner, he helped the junior drink on her behalf and even gave her a ride back to the dorm. Lara didn't argue with him about it. Instead, she broke up with him on the spot. At the time, his whole world collapsed. For 6 months after their breakup, he couldn't even remember how he survived. It had taken immense effort and pleading on his part to win Lara back. He'd barely managed to convince her to give him a second chance. Now, as he pushed open the bedroom door, his hand was trembling violently. The room was pitch black. The bed was neat and untouched. Empty. Even the subtle traces of her presence had vanished. Oliver rushed into the room, frantically opening every door he could find. But every room was empty. His hands shaking, he dialed her number. The call connected, but no one answered. Forcing himself to calm down, Oliver lit a cigarette and took a deep drag. He quickly pulled up Pablo's number and called him. "Pablo, send someone to find her. Start immediately. Go investigate. What should I look into?" "Mr. Oliver?" Oliver relayed the address of the club Lara had visited earlier in the day. "Find out where she went after leaving the club, where she is now, and who she's been in contact with recently. Pablo, check her documents, airports, train stations, bus terminals. Don't miss a single location. And trace her phone's location. Inform me the moment you have any news." Chapter 12. Oliver turned and headed downstairs, driving straight to the airport. There weren't many places she could go, apart from her small hometown a few hundred miles away. There was also the city where her close college friend had married and settled. Oliver tried to calm himself. He told himself that he had always been discreet. He had warned his friends, ensuring none of them dared to gossip in front of her. Zoe wouldn't dare, either. So, maybe she had only overheard some vague rumors. Maybe it was because he had been coming home late too often recently. spending too little time with her, breaking a few promises. She might be upset and just wanted to teach him a lesson. Things weren't like they were before. They were married now, with all their interests tied together. Her health wasn't good, and she had been staying home to recover. Without him, she was like a bird released from a gilded cage. She wouldn't survive for long. Oliver repeated these thoughts to himself, but they did little to ease his turmoil. His heart thudded relentlessly in his chest the entire drive. His insides churned as if his heart were being grilled over flames, tortured by the uncertainty. At a red light, he dialed her number again. Still, no one answered. As he neared the airport, Pablo called. Madam left the club around 4 p.m., but the entire street's surveillance footage has been blocked, so we couldn't track her movements. We also checked the airport and train stations. There's no record of her traveling. Mr. Oliver, it's possible Madam is still in the city. Oliver gripped the steering wheel tightly, exhaling a sudden breath of relief. Keep searching, no matter what. Find her for me. What about her phone's location? Have you tracked it? We couldn't. It seems Madam's phone location has been deliberately disabled or tampered with. A loud buzzing filled Oliver's mind, leaving it blank. Pablo continued speaking, but Oliver couldn't hear a word. He suddenly remembered what she had said when she asked him for money that day. She mentioned preparing a gift for him, left at the reception office of their old school. She had told him to pick it up 3 days later, tomorrow. But Oliver couldn't wait another second. Chapter 13. By the time Oliver sped to the school, it was already past midnight. The lights in the reception office had long been turned off, ignoring everything else. He got out of the car and banged on the door. Suddenly, a chill touched the tip of his nose. Oliver instinctively reached up to wipe it, only to feel the cold touch of snowflakes. It was the first snow of the season in the capital. It had also been during a first snow like this when he and Lara fell in love. Standing amidst the thickening snowfall, Oliver found himself dazed, unable to snap out of it for a long time. It wasn't until the old guard called his name several times that he finally came back to his senses. What was handed to him was a simple brown envelope. As he took it, it felt like holding a burning coal. Instinctively, he wanted to throw it away. Perhaps he already knew what was inside. Perhaps he simply didn't want to face it. But in the end, he opened it. The first thing his eyes landed on were the bold words, divorce agreement. On the last page was her handwritten signature and fingerprint. Beneath that were printed records of chat messages. Aside from these, she hadn't left him a single word. And yet, it seemed as if everything that needed to be said or done was already clear. One glance at the chat logs, and Oliver crushed the paper into a ball. He handed the old guard a cigarette, apologizing and thanking him with forced politeness. Then, without hesitation, he drove straight to Zoe's place. When she opened the door, Zoe was groggy with sleep but instantly overjoyed. Throwing herself at him for a hug, Oliver raised his hand and slapped her so hard she was stunned. Without saying a word, his face cold, he struck her again and again. Zoe's face swelled, and her lips split. Blood trickling down, she could no longer stand, collapsing to the floor, clutching her abdomen and sobbing for mercy. Oliver looked down at her, towering over her with cold indifference. Then, without a shred of pity, he kicked her in the stomach. Zoe screamed in pain, almost passing out as she rolled on the floor, clutching her abdomen. Blood poured from between her legs, staining the white carpet red. But Oliver wasn't done. He bent down, grabbed Zoe by her collar, and nearly lifted her off the ground. What do you think you are? He gripped her swollen face so hard it seemed her jaw might dislocate. His handsome features were twisted into a terrifying snarl, but his voice remained eerily calm and cold. A woman who sells herself, daring to trouble my wife? I let you keep the child only because I didn't want my wife to suffer. You think being pregnant makes you special? Zoe, who gave you the courage to upset my wife and make her angry? Zoe's vision blurred as waves of pain radiated from her abdomen like knives twisting inside her. She was terrified, filled with regret. Why had she been so greedy? Why had she dared to imagine taking the place of Mrs. Oliver? If she just quietly had the child, would she not have enjoyed wealth and comfort? I won't do it again, Oliver. I swear I won't. Please, save the baby. The baby is dying. It's too late. Oliver pushed her away with utter disgust. Zoe, you'd better pray to the heavens that my wife forgives me and comes back home. Because if she doesn't, your life is truly over. Oliver, this is your child too. Zoe's body convulsed in pain as she lay helplessly on the floor, struggling in agony. Her bloodied hands desperately reached out to grab Oliver, but he stepped back, coldly watching as she writhed and eventually passed out from the pain. Only then did he make a call. Send her to the hospital. Just make sure she doesn't die. Without sparing Zoe another glance, Oliver turned and left the room. By the time he reached the ground floor, the snow had already formed a thin white layer on the ground. Wearing only a shirt and trousers, Oliver didn't feel the cold. He dialed Lara's number again, but still, no one answered. Lowering his gaze, he stared at the wedding ring on his finger. Then, he suddenly remembered it had been days since Lara had worn her wedding ring. So, that day at the hospital, she must have seen everything, heard everything. And yet, at the time, she didn't confront him. Not even a single tear fell. How deeply disappointed must she have been in him? Oliver didn't dare imagine, just as he couldn't find the words to describe how he felt at that moment. Chapter 14. I followed my professor to a small town in the northwest, thousands of miles away. The conditions were rough, and the schedule was packed. My professor worried that my health wouldn't hold up, but after pushing through the initial discomfort, I gradually adapted to the fast-paced life and work. I got a new phone and number. However, I kept my old phone turned on and the number active, though I left it at my place and didn't carry it with me. On the old phone, there were calls and messages from Oliver almost every day, but I didn't answer or read a single one. After arriving in the northwest, I called Roma and briefly explained what had happened with Oliver. Roma was furious, cursing Oliver over the phone for a full 10 minutes. No wonder you disappeared without a word. Lara, Oliver's been losing his mind looking for you. He even came to the hospital and cornered me several times. But I really don't know where you went, so it's no use for him to bother me. He's also asked just about every classmate you were close to. I reminded Roma. If he asks again, just tell him you don't know. I know. Don't worry, I won't let him bother you. But, Lara, are you coming back? Of course, I still have to go back and finalize the divorce. What if he refuses to sign the divorce papers? I laughed. Doesn't matter. I'll be traveling all over the place. He won't be able to find me. We can just drag it out. Oliver's family won't stand for that. He's their only son, and he has a legacy to inherit. After the call ended, a few junior colleagues came to invite me out for dinner. Dinner was lamb hot pot, fragrant and steaming. Back in Beijing, I had always been cautious with my diet due to my poor health. I rarely ate beef or lamb, worried that it might overwhelm me. But now that I am here, adapting to the local customs, I feel more energetic than ever. My professor even jokes, "You look so much healthier these past few days. Not like when I first saw you, your face was so pale back then. It's all because I'm happy being with you, eating well and sleeping soundly." I teased, holding my bowl and leaning against her shoulder playfully. How old are you? And you're still acting like this in front of your juniors? Pretending to scold me. My professor picked up a big piece of meat and placed it in my bowl. Eat it while it's hot. Have some more. I took a big bite of the meat, but suddenly my nose tingled with the urge to cry, not wanting my professor to see my tears. I finished the meat in my bowl along with the salty tears that had slipped out. That night, after returning to my place, my old phone kept buzzing incessantly. Oliver, for some reason, was calling nonstop. When it finally quieted down, I sent him the first and last message I would ever send. Sign the divorce papers. I will return to finalize the divorce. Beyond that, don't contact me again. If you do, I will permanently deactivate this number. The moment I sent the message, Oliver called again. I still didn't answer. This time, he didn't call back a second time. Instead, after a long pause, he replied with a single word. Okay. Chapter 15. After sending the message, Oliver slumped onto the sofa, suddenly covering his face as he laughed silently. His friends sat nearby, exchanging uneasy glances. but none dared to say anything. These past few days, Oliver had been desperately searching for Lara, almost to the point of madness. Though he kept it quiet, the news had already begun to spread within their social circle. His mistress, Zoe, wasn't faring any better. Word had it that she was taken to the hospital too late, and her uterus couldn't be saved. Yet Oliver still refused to let her off. A few days ago, she was expelled from school, and her parents, ashamed of her, severed ties. Now she clung to life like walking on thin ice, likely spending every moment praying for Lara to return. Only then might Oliver spare her. But Lara seemed to have vanished into thin air. There wasn't a single trace of her. Bro, was that a message from your wife just now? Someone finally worked up the nerve to ask. Oliver leaned back on the sofa, eyes closed, silent for a long time. Just as everyone thought he wouldn't answer, he suddenly spoke. She really doesn't want me anymore. The atmosphere froze for a moment. That can't be. You two have been together for so many years. Once she calms down, just sincerely apologize. She's soft-hearted. She'll forgive you. Oliver simply shook his head. You don't understand her. Before he could say more, the door was suddenly kicked open with a loud crash as it slammed against the wall. Everyone jumped. Turning to look, Oliver sat up slowly, narrowing his eyes. When he saw who it was, his eyebrows raised, and a mocking smile curled his lips. So, it's you, Ryan. Ryan didn't respond and didn't even glance at anyone else in the room. He strode straight to Oliver, kicked over the coffee table, and grabbed Oliver by the collar. No one expected such strength from someone as lean as Ryan. Half drunk, Oliver was hauled up and slammed against the wall. What? You want to fight? Oliver smirked, his tone dripping with sarcasm and malice. But before he could finish, Ryan punched him square in the face. Oliver, 5 years ago, I warned you. If you ever treated her poorly, I wouldn't let you get away with it. Blood trickled from Oliver's nose as he turned his face away. Unfazed, he wiped it with the back of his hand and returned the punch with force. The room quickly descended into chaos. Glass bottles shattered. Tables and chairs toppled over. Half drunk, Oliver quickly fell behind, knocked to the ground by Ryan's relentless kicks. Both men were bloodied. Oliver's face was almost unrecognizable, and Ryan's hand was gashed, blood dripping steadily. And who the hell do you think you are? What happens between me and my wife is none of your damn business. Propping himself up on one knee against the sofa, Oliver sneered coldly, laughter bubbling up through his battered lips. Chapter 16. What's this? Heard we had a fight, and you couldn't wait to swoop in and take advantage? Too bad. Ryan, 5 years ago, Lara chose me over you, and 5 years later, nothing's changed. Ryan slowly clenched his bloodied hand, the wound on the back splitting further, looking terrifying, yet he seemed completely unaware of the pain. It was as though a thorn had lodged itself deep in his heart, piercing further and further, burrowing into his flesh, leaving him restless day and night. As an old friend, let me give you some advice. Stop obsessing over another man's wife. Oliver's smile was cruel and malicious. We've been married 3 years now, slept together more times than I can count. He fixed his gaze on Ryan's face, watching every flicker of pain, savoring it like a drug. All rationality had abandoned him. He wanted nothing more than to see Ryan suffer, to watch him break. Her first love, first kiss, first night, they were all mine. What do you have to compete with me, Ryan? Everyone knows how much Lara loves me. It's because she loves me that she can't tolerate a speck of betrayal. The more she fights with me, the more it proves she cares. So what's the point of you coming all this way? You think you can swoop in and win her over while she's vulnerable? Keep dreaming, Ryan. In Lara's eyes, you've never existed. She'll never love you. Using the sofa for support, Oliver struggled to stand, despite his disheveled state. Standing before Ryan, the man who had lost years ago, he insisted on maintaining his superiority. I'm not divorcing my wife. Give up. You'll never have a chance. Not in this lifetime, Oliver. Ryan looked at him, his gaze like frost, cold and resolute. If I had known 5 years ago what a piece of trash you were, I'd have taken her away no matter what it cost, whether she hated me or blamed me. And what gives you the right to take her from me? Or maybe you're just a masochist who likes sloppy seconds. Ryan suddenly raised his bloodied hand, slamming it hard against Oliver's jaw. His eyes burned crimson as he stared down at Oliver. I'll be waiting to see you get what you deserve. Chapter 17. Oliver never really believed in karma, but when he finally traveled thousands of miles to that small town buried in sand, only to watch Ryan find Lara in the desert before him, he suddenly understood. His karma had arrived, swift, merciless, and completely unexpected. He was unprepared and powerless to fight back. The sandstorm swirled, obscuring the sky and the earth. He didn't know if Lara had seen him. All he could do was stand there as Ryan carefully helped her, injured, into the desert SUV. And when she was too weak to move, Ryan carried her into the vehicle. Oliver followed the car to the hospital. Her professor stopped him at the door, but Ryan went into the examination room with her. The wind had ceased, and the swirling sand had settled. Oliver spat out a mouthful of grit and lit a cigarette. One after another. He couldn't stop. He asked her professor, panicked and desperate, "Has she been here with you this whole time?" "Yes. She works hard and endures a lot. Her health isn't good." Oliver swallowed the lump in his throat. "Has it been very hard for her recently?" The professor raised her chin slightly, gazing at him indifferently. "No. She's been very happy." Oliver's bloodshot eyes looked terrifying. "Maybe it was the sandstorm." "Professor, do I still have a chance? Will she forgive me? I really regret it. I know I was wrong." He looked like a helpless and lost child. This tall man clung to the professor's sleeve, on the verge of tears. "I don't know," the professor said calmly, "but I respect Lara's decisions." "Professor, please help me, won't you?" But the professor shook her head and gently pushed his hand away. "Lara is my most outstanding student. I know her well, and she's very much like me in temperament. In this matter, no one can help you. But, Professor, we've been together for 10 years. And so what?" The professor's smile was faint but contemptuous. "My ex-husband and I were married for 15 years. He even knelt and cried, begging me. But a tainted man is a tainted man. No different from trash. Oliver, we women are not garbage collectors. If you truly care about your 10 years together, then let her go." Chapter 18. On the day our divorce was finalized, as we walked out of the Civil Affairs Bureau, Oliver called after me, "Wife." His expression was blank, his whole demeanor devoid of energy. Those once passionate, reckless eyes were now dull and lifeless. "Call me by my name, Lara." Oliver stepped closer. Standing before me, he gazed at me earnestly, and for a moment, a faint glimmer of hope seemed to rise in his dim eyes. "We can still be friends, can't we? Like 10 years ago. We can start as friends." I shook my head. "No, we can't." "But Lara," I cut him off firmly. "Oliver, 5 years ago, I told you, forgiveness doesn't exist in my vocabulary. Back then, I compromised and took a step back for your sake, and 5 years later, I got what I deserved. Then we don't have to be friends. We can start as strangers. Please, just one more chance. I swear." "Oliver, don't you know me by now? In your eyes, I'm just ordinary Lara, but in reality, I'm incredibly stubborn." Oliver suddenly looked at me, his eyes widening. "That night, you heard everything?" I nodded calmly. "Yes. I heard it all." The faint glimmer in his eyes shattered like fractured ice. "But Lara, you took your favorite pearl necklace and our wedding ring with you. You can't let go of what we had." He was like a drowning man, desperately clinging to the last straw of hope, but I crushed his final illusion. I burned them all at the jewelry workshop. "Oliver, if you're looking for our so-called past feelings, you can try the sewers." Without another word, I turned and walked away. But Oliver quickly caught up to me. "You're going to be with Ryan, aren't you?" "But Lara, all men are the same. He's only pursuing you because he hasn't had you yet. Once he does, he'll make the same mistakes I did." "So what?" I looked at him, my gaze calm. "After having someone as terrible as you as an ex, what's left to fear? Are you going to marry him?" "I'll think carefully about marriage," But I'm still young. I can have both a career I love and a man I love. You love him? I smiled at him. What does it have to do with you? Chapter 19. While waiting for the traffic light to turn green, I noticed a car parked by the roadside. In the early spring chill, Ryan was leaning against it, dressed in a black jacket. The bare branches above were budding with pale yellow sprouts. The wind still carried a trace of cold. He stood quietly, but his gaze frequently drifted in my direction, searching for me, and when he finally saw me, he instantly straightened up. Just as the sun broke through the clouds, a soft halo of light fell into his eyes. Lara. He began walking toward me with long strides. As the light turned green, and the frozen crowd began to flow once more, the crosswalk came alive with rhythmic movements, but I stood still, unmoving, smiling faintly. I tilted my head, watching him walk toward me with purposeful steps, like a timeless scene from a film. Lara. He reached me at last, looking down with nervous eyes. He seemed unsettled, his breathing uneven. The cold wind had tinted his ears faintly red. I looked up at him, and for a moment, I remembered the rebellious boy he had been so many years ago. It dawned on me that all those coincidental encounters on the way to and from school weren't coincidences. That every stolen glance, every fleeting moment when our eyes met, hadn't happened. I couldn't imagine how he must have felt back then, watching as I devoted myself entirely to Oliver. How much he must have hidden behind his last glance and final smile when I chose Oliver over him. But love has never been rational. Back then, Ryan and Oliver were polar opposites, and at that time, as a sensitive, emotional girl, I naturally gravitated toward Oliver, who knew how to make me laugh. It seemed inevitable. I don't regret the past, but now, I've decided to move forward. Have you been waiting long? I asked with a smile. Not long, just long enough. His hand, hanging loosely at his side, slowly rose as if to hold mine, but hesitated. Ryan. I called his name and stomped my feet lightly. Beijing's spring winds are so cold. Are you cold? Yes. My hands are freezing. I stretched out my hands, showing him my fingers, reddened by the chill. Ryan said nothing, but gently took my hands in his. He rubbed my icy fingertips until the warmth returned, then naturally tucked my hand into the pocket of his coat. The light turned green again. The crowd began to flow, vibrant and alive. With his hand in mine, Ryan led me into the bustling stream of people. Spring had arrived, its warmth steadily growing. It was the perfect season for love. Chapter 20. Oliver. Lara eventually married Ryan. At the wedding, many of their old classmates, friends, and teachers attended, even more than when Oliver had married her. The wedding wasn't as extravagant or grand as his had been, but it was undeniably warm and filled with happiness. Oliver saw the entire wedding through his friends' social media. Everyone around him told him to move on, to stop watching. The couple was deeply in love, their affection sweet and syrupy. Why torture himself by watching? But Oliver couldn't stop himself. He was like a thief hiding in the shadows, peering in, unsure whether he was searching for cracks in their happiness, or simply sprinkling salt on his own wounds. He didn't sleep the entire night. He kept scrolling through every photo, every video of them together. Lara was still breathtakingly beautiful. The years of traveling, enduring hardships, and working in tough conditions had not worn her down. Instead, she looked more vibrant and healthier than she had ever been as his wife. He'd heard that Ryan and Lara spent much of those years apart, often losing contact for months at a time. Oliver had secretly hoped that Ryan, being a man, would eventually falter, because if anyone knew the flaws of men, it was him. He couldn't believe Ryan could remain loyal, without resentment, without a single slip. He even had people keep tabs on Ryan, hoping to catch him slipping and use it to drive a wedge between them. But years passed, and Ryan remained as steadfast as ever, without a single misstep. The only solace Oliver found was that Lara had refused Ryan's marriage proposals several times. Each time he heard this, he felt a secret joy, but it didn't last long. Though Lara didn't immediately agree to marry Ryan, every time she returned to Beijing, she stayed in Ryan's home. At first, Oliver eagerly anticipated her visits. It gave him a chance to see her from a distance, to ease his longing. But over time, he began to dread her returns, because every night, he would dream of Lara and Ryan together in bed. Oliver thought that he might never forget those dreams, not even in death. When Lara first moved into Ryan's home, the two didn't leave for 3 days. 3 days later, they went to the supermarket together. Ryan looked radiant, like a man who had everything he wanted. And Lara, she glowed with a freshness, like a budding flower after the rain. Sitting in his car, watching from afar, Oliver felt a despair so deep that he nearly wished for death. In the second year of Lara and Ryan's marriage, she became pregnant. That same year, after a drunken night, Oliver was brutally attacked by Zoe in a calculated act of revenge. The past few years, he had lived like a ghost, pouring all his rage onto Zoe. At first, she endured it, terrified of him, but eventually, she broke and fought back, ready to drag him down with her. He survived her attack, but fate had its own plans. As Lara's belly grew with Ryan's child, Oliver was dealt a devastating diagnosis by his doctor. He would spend the rest of his life in a wheelchair, and he had lost the ability to ever have children. Oliver thought back to Ryan's scornful words. That bastard had been right after all. He had betrayed the woman he loved most, destroyed the only child he would ever have. And now, he had lost Lara forever, with no hope of ever having a family again. It was karma, and the long, hopeless years that stretched ahead of him would be spent paying for his sins, trapped in the misery of his own making, a punishment with no escape.